Well, welcome back to another episode of See, Hear, Love. And this is a treat for me because I have a special guest, but also someone I've known for a number of years because he's been part of my church community and just, it feels like I've known him for like 100 years, but maybe not so long. But grateful to have Alex Nicholls with us. And Alex, welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So Alex is a student art therapist, and Alex, this is really great. The reason why I'm having you on is because you've been on three of our See Here Love broadcast shows, YouTube shows, video streaming shows, doing your art therapy, painting while we, oh my goodness, while we talked. And I guess, I mean, really how this happened, Alex, was at church. I think, were you doing an Easter painting on stage?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were doing our Easter service, and part of that was having kind of this painting, art kind of as worship kind of aspect to the service, and yeah, I was up there doing that while the worship music was going. So yeah, a fun experience that day.
Yeah, and I remember sitting in the front like I always do, or close by to the front, much to the
Yeah.
chagrin of my husband, who was like, "Why always the front of the church?" But that's just me. And I remember looking at that as you're painting, I'm like, "Wow, that adds such another kind of a sensory experience." So I'm listening, but I'm watching you paint and creating something out of the music. And I think for me, I was like, that would be really neat to try on a See Your Love show. It's never been done. We've never done it. And so called you up or DM'd you or something and was like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And so I asked you, what did you think? Like when I was like, "Hey, Alex, can you do some art therapy on a women's show?" Initial response or
Yeah, I
reaction.
mean, I love that opportunity. The kind of, I have kind of two aspects to what I do. I have the kind of art therapy side of things, and then I have this kind of art through worship, which really go hand in hand.
Word.
And I just loved the opportunity that you were kind of giving to, yeah, to be able to kind of sit in. And for those who aren't really kind of audio, kind of verbal kind of learners or people who participate in that way, just have that other kind of visual component to be
Mhm.
able to think about, to be able to reflect on during a service, during a TV show,
Mhm.
just that other kind of way of tying in, yeah, like you said, that kind of sensory component to what we share. And amazingly, you allowed me to sit in on that particular show, those shows, multiple
Yeah.
shows, and be able to just visually represent some of those things that I heard, some of those things that I thought were really important and significant for the audience to be able to pick up on. Yeah, just a really great experience. So thanks so much for doing that. And when you asked, of course, whenever Melinda asks you to do anything, the answer is yes, and then you figure it out afterwards.
To my husband and to all that are listening, rewind just what Alex said. When I ask, it's a yes. And I think I'm just going to pull that clip out, Alex, on all the reels, all the stories,
Yeah,
all the socials. So thank you for that soundbite. Really appreciate that. And we're done. Thank you for being on the
yeah,
podcast. You said what you needed
you're
to say.
welcome.
um, for those that don't know, art therapy, like I'm fascinated by it. So, I have
Yeah.
you come on, and as you're listening to our conversations, you're painting these images, which we'll get into a little bit later. But like, what is it? Because I know people are like, well, I know therapy, I know counseling, psychotherapists, and they talk to me, they listen. So maybe give sort of us an overview, a quick learning of what really is art therapy, the process, what is the outcome, why should people do it?
Yeah, for sure. So just like psychotherapy, talk therapy, where you typically come with something that you verbally want to process, art therapy is an opportunity to do the same type of process, that same type of internal reflection of what's going on, what emotions you're feeling, but in a state where you start with a visual. So rather than having to articulate the stress, the tension, the emotions, the big emotions, any of the kind of trauma or challenges, life challenges that you're experiencing, art therapy is really an opportunity to put that all out as an expression on a piece of paper. And that can be anything from stick figures to a scribble that encompasses how you're feeling, to symbols, to patterns, to a particular picture that kind of strikes you. Like I said, a lot of us process in that kind of visual kind of way, and words come kind of as a second level of communication to us. And so this allows us to tap into that original feeling, that felt sense of what we've experienced, what challenges we're facing. And then what we do as art therapists is we actually invite the client to interpret that artwork. So some people think, oh, you're going to come in, you're going to kind of psychoanalyze what I put down on a piece of paper, but actually it's allowing the client to express what that is. So for example, it might be express how you're feeling today, or how this particular experience felt to you as if it was some weather. What would it look like if it was a weather pattern? How would you draw that out? So on a piece of paper, someone may put in a thunderstorm. But to some people, that thunderstorm is intense emotions, really negative experience. It's darkness, it's challenge. But for other people, a thunderstorm is rain. It's splashing in Wellington boots, in puddles. It's new life. It's growth. It's that kind of refreshing energy, the lightning, the excitement as well. And so it's really down to the person what it is that they're actually experiencing. And then from there, what is that growth? What is that excitement? What does it feel like to be splashing in those puddles in that storm? What does that new life look like? How can we kind of reframe that and allow people to explore what those emotions are that are tied up in that particular experience?
Now, Alex, do you think most people need to do that art therapy? Like, is there something in everybody that needs to kind of tap into that and express that visually? Or do you think there's certain people that that's better for, versus some people who are just like going to share and talk about their feelings, versus, because it sounds like to me like it's such a creative outlet, but I don't know if everybody would access it or want to do that. I mean, let alone though, a lot of people don't even want to go to therapy in the first place, even talk about their emotions. So maybe we need to start with that and go there. But I don't know. I just feel like everybody should do something like that, because that is another part of, I think, the creative part of us, even if some people are more creative or more visual than others. I don't know. Just a question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It goes along kind of hand in hand with that question, who's an artist? What is an artist?
Yeah.
And so that opportunity for people to express themselves, like I said, stick figures are more than welcome in art therapy. We are a big fan of your stick figures.
Yeah.
And that kind of expression. But in terms of the actual process of art making, that can be anything. So that can be painting, it can be drawing, it can be making things out of clay, or it could be even arranging leaves and sticks on a piece of paper just to represent what that emotion is like. And so it's just a great additional tool set. If verbal communication, if you're talking, if you think in words, if you're able to process in words, it's great. But sometimes those emotions are bigger than our ability to communicate in words. I mean, they talk about a picture being worth 1,000 words. There's that kind of sense of, if you're experiencing, like I said, a particular trauma or a particularly big or complex emotion, how are you going to express that in words, rather than maybe starting with a piece of paper or a bunch of Play-Doh? Those can be options of how you would start to express that and then process that feeling. And even in the art making process itself, there's kind of a zone that you sometimes get into when you're creating, that can just allow your brain to kind of capture things that maybe aren't, immediately accessible when you start kind of talking about challenges. But we work with a range of people, everything from kids who are too young to maybe articulate their emotions, people with acquired brain injury or trauma, post-traumatic stress disorders, veterans or people who've experienced war or conflict. Often use art therapy as a way of communicating, but it really is open to anyone.
Amazing. So let's talk about your experience at See Hear Love, because you did 3 shows, and I want your thoughts, if you can remember way back, but on each show, because I find it fascinating if you can remember what you drew, but also thought. So the first show that we introduced you and you started painting was the New Year, New You, this word for the year. And so you just sit and listen to us, and Cheryl was like, cellulite. And, we were all, saying all kinds of fun stuff. And I was saying, like, I need to go more green. And it was more like, I was eating green or being more refreshed and healthy. And there was so many things like that. So let's go there. Your thoughts on that show. Like, so you're drawing, you're listening. What's your initial thoughts about the conversation? And I say this because as a man, maybe sort of setting this up, Alex, for you, like as a man, you're listening on to a women's conversation. So maybe if we can kind of go through, I'd love to hear your thoughts on our conversation. What did you think of it? Do you have questions about what we said? Was there something that was like, whoa? And then your drawing of what we said, how that connected. I know that's a lot, but I just want to hear more about that. And I think our listeners and viewers are like, okay, that's cool. So the first show you came in, set you up in studio, was the New Year's show. So
New Year's show.
Yes, New Year, New You, word of the year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big fan of that kind of word for a year. A number of people who are close to me have used that partly on, you kind of initiating some of those conversations. So it was great to be able to be involved in that process. But a lot of the time, you're just trying to listen for words that feel like they're important to someone, like they either are repeated a number of times, there's a particular significance or a particular thing that kind of emotionally triggers in you yourself as the artist. You're looking for those things of significance that maybe can be represented in a way. So sometimes those representations that I drew or painted were very kind of literal representations. I remember at some points there was leaves. Sometimes they're more kind of figurative. There's a number of kind of crosses to represent, the core kind of faith component of some of the conversations. And some of them are just feelings, particular emotions that for me relate to colors or patterns, again, that you can express. And it's really trying to tap into what the audience is likely to engage with as well. It's not kind of prescriptive about, this is the only way of interpreting this, but it does allow the opportunity for the mind and imagination to kind of explore a little bit. What would you use as a symbol instead? Even if it provokes whoa, wait a second, that doesn't jive with me. There's still that opportunity of being able to explore what those feelings were. And for the first show of the year, the New Year's show, it was really looking at what was the meaning behind those words and how could those words be explored? How could they kind of branch and grow? How can the words kind of act as a seed and then be expanded into different ways that, again, engage with people's imagination.
Yeah. Now, did it encourage you? I mean, here you have 4 women sitting on the couch, and we're looking ahead to, trying to be these best women that we can be. And we all had different words. We never share. I never have them share the words before. Actually, what's interesting, we've never had the same word. I mean, there's so many words. So, but what was that like? I mean, you're sitting there and like, we're this is what our hope is for this year. we joked, but then there was some like really sort of deep, serious things about, simplify and serve and send. I remember that Joanna was send, and Kimberly was simplify, and I think Cheryl was servanthood, and then I was the only V word, like verdure, which was this random word that looked like verdure, but it's verdure, and it means like lush green vegetation. Like it was so.
Yes.
But what was that like to listen in on that? Conversation of like our hopes, and I think women just sitting there talking about this is what we want to become.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about being an art therapist is, as a male art therapist, I am one of a very few. I trained with majority kind of female gender people in my training process. It's amazing and such a privilege to be able to listen to different people's perspectives, and be able to kind of share some level of input, some level of interpretation, or some level of processing what the visual representation would look like. But there is that sense of wanting to honor whatever voice is there in the room, trying to honor the kind of feminine kind of components of what was being discussed. And I think as a therapist, that's really important, and as a human being, that's really important to be able to listen to each other, being able to share some insight, but also trying to honor each other's stories well. I know that's one of the things that you and I share in common. It's that idea of you get to steward and in some way present people's stories to the world. How can you do that in an honoring way? And so really it's trying to key into what is significant for the person, what are they experiencing, and not be too much interpreting, not too much involved in the process, and just again being really, feeling that gratitude. It is something that it is extremely gratitude invoking to be able to listen to someone's story, to be able to have a window into their life, into their circumstances. And I think it's a skill that we all need a muscle that we all need to practice, that ability to listen and hopefully hear. And, I love that's the whole concept of your show. That's the whole kind of reason that it's See, Hear, Love. It's that ability to share a story, but also sharing those emotions as well. Bringing a little bit of ourselves, a little bit of empathy into the space.
It's good. Now the second show, I actually just want your initial thoughts. And again, I know you were painting, but your thoughts. So we talked about ageism and aging well, and it came out of a conversation. Obviously, the last while in media. And the conversation, at the forefront of women and ageism and gray hair and the struggle, I think, even personally for me, as a woman in media, aging, and the conversations I've had around, dinner parties with my girlfriends on the real struggle with it. I mean, like my husband, Chris, says, Melinda, it's inevitable. I mean, I don't want to sound, kind of depressing, but death and aging are inevitable. These are the things that are going to happen to us. So, how do you age well? So when we were listening to that conversation, because that was a very vulnerable conversation, it was for me. I've always shared, youth was always sort of on my side. I loved being a young person. I benefited from it greatly. I was invited to the table on so many youth initiatives and things. And then as I've gotten older, I've had to really adjust and change into this, oh, wait a second, I'm not a young person. How am I going to bring in the next generation? Will I be an advocate, a champion for next generation? Now I'm thinking legacy. So when you were
Oh,
listening to that, what was that like for you? Like our conversation, it was really honest and difficult. I had a lot of feedback from that show, Alex, from a
oh,
number of women who were like, "Thanks for going there." Uh,
yeah.
but what were your thoughts? Like as a man listening to us women really kind of go, what are the negatives? What are the positives? Are there any positives? How are we navigating it? What are our struggles? What have we lost because of it? And then how can we encourage other women as they age to, embrace, feel empowered in that? But yeah, what were your initial thoughts? I'd love to hear your perspective on that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, incredible privilege to be able to both sit in and paint during that process and that discussion. I think, yeah, as a man hearing the conversation, as a male, the sense of injustice that is there is strong. The sense of frustration, I think, with particularly a society that tends to less value that older voice, that more kind of seasoned or mature kind of input into the type of media that we hear, the type of conversations that we have,
Sure.
that discounting of people who are in that process of aging, of going through that particular season of life. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to have that side of things, and then to reflect on um, often the toxic masculinity
Hmm.
that compound that as well. And so I think it's just in those circumstances, again, trying to be a listener, trying to actually
Yes.
hear what's being said, trying to hear the heart of the people who are talking, what their concerns are, what their reality is. And then often after creating the piece, it's even reflecting back on it and saying, okay, what is my response? And I was very privileged to be able to respond through the artwork in that moment, hearing the particular episode, the particular viewpoints, the particular stories of your co-hosts, and be able to reflect back some of those feelings that it stirred. But then it's taking on the responsibility. It's,
Yeah.
as a person who consumes media, who is able to use the buying power, the ability to make my own choices. How do I make choices that are more informed? And I think about this in terms of the topic that you covered in terms of aging. I think about this in terms of things that you've also covered. Those kind, indigenous rights, the rights of and the intersectionality with kind of BIPOC community, the different challenges that we face, and it's being a humble listener as much as we can. It's something that I think we all struggle with, that kind of like pride and wanting to jump in.
Then
So listening for what the solution is being proposed is, and then it's coming alongside and adding our support, whether it be financial, whether it be visual in terms of media and the content that we put out. Just how do we continue to support each other in moving the needle on some of those really big issues.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you for saying that. It's been, the conversation is, obviously See Her Love and the show and myself is really about being an advocate and champion for women. But as I do this work, Alex, we can't do this work without men who will be our allies and our support and listeners and help with solutions. Because that's the other part. It's like women, 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 but realizing that we have to all be in this to make this work. It can't just be women supporting women and men not supporting women, or women not supporting men. Like it's got to be all of us. And I'm grateful for you and my husband Chris, who are like that. I mean, they have strong women in their lives, and it's been great to have you in our lives to be that support and listen and champion and advocate. And that's the truth. So I really appreciate what you said there. And I think what really stood out was that sort of humble listener. Like, to listen is really powerful, but then you said, but then there's solutions. Like, again, that's it. It's like, I'm all about the listening. So we're going to listen. But then if you just sit with the listening and do nothing, then nothing's going to change. There's got to be the next step of listening and then a doing, or figure out a solution and working together for it. But yeah, thank you for saying that. It's hard. I mean, I think, the greatest negative voice for a lot of us is ourselves as women. I think not just for women, for all of us, right? I mean, you can't do that. You're getting too old. You don't look young enough. Look at your wrinkles. Like that voice is so loud. So to silence that voice and to have people that will, speak truth and love and grace and possibility into is so important, men and women, So yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Alex. And to our listeners and to our viewers, I hope this conversation really encouraged you today. And maybe it will give you sort of pause to think about how your word of the year is going, which, as Alex was talking, I'm like, oh, how's my verdure? How am I being green and fresh and healthy? So, oops, maybe I need to do a little stop on that. Maybe this conversation had you take a pause on aging well. And so I hope this conversation encouraged you. And as you take pause, journal, pray into these topics, know that you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God. Thanks for joining us.